Yes. Hello everyone. Today our topic is cost estimation and budgeting in project management. We will be talking about what kind of different costs we have, and then how we can budget this. Actually, normally in the classroom, I started with that exercise giving that to you. So I want to ask you here, Ece and Mira, we are just three of us, so we can talk about this. So think about you want to make a project plan for an Italian franchise coffee company, okay? They want to open up a coffee house in Ankara, and they ask your advisory or project plan, estimating the cost of this investment, right? So they want it in Bahçelievler. Do you know Bahçelievler, by the way, in Ankara? Both of you?
Yes.
Yes. So
Yes.
they approximately look at 200 square meters of place, and they want you to prepare a cost budget. So what kind of costs do you look up firstly? I mean, just come to your minds. What kind of costs do you think exist for opening up such a place, or opening up such a place?
I think it's first of all we have to talk about the venue and whether it's done for a coffee shop or do we need a inşaat hatırlayamadım hocam İngilizcesini for it. And it will be for my opinion, it will be the first stage of the project so that we can talk about the budget for the venue and the expenses for the construction. Yes, construction.
Construction expenses, if there is any, right?
Yes.
So they will start with that. What else?
After construction, if we need a construction, we have to need the employees for doing those construction.
Okay, this is related to construction expense.
Okay. After all, after the construction, we will need the the kitchen things. Do we need only a coffee shop, or are we going to serve food as well? And so that will bring the question of what should we get for which kind of cupboards, and do we need some?
Actually, we're talking about raw material, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Selling that. Yes. What else?
And after all, the raw material we zaten sayıyoruz hepsini galiba hocam içinde değil mi?
Aynen.
Okay. So and then we are going to talk about how many people we need for this coffee house for like employee.
Okay, employee cost story.
And where can we count the expenses of water, electricity, Wi-Fi, something like that?
Yes,
so
utilities.
Because we are living in a globalized world and everyone needs Wi-Fi.
Wi-Fi, yes, utilities. Yes.
After all, the materials for the the market expenses, like where will we go to buy the coffee, like from Lavazza, from Nescafe? We have to find the stakeholder for this coffee shop. Okay. So that
supplier, you mean?
Supplier, yes. And make an arrangement with them, like an annual or 6 months. I don't know what it depends on the firm. And what else I'm thinking of?
Okay, while you are thinking, Hümeyra, do you want to talk?
Maybe we should pay the rent for coffee shop. And also we need to employee insurance. It's important for me. Maybe we need to marketing expenses for new coffee shop.
Okay. These kind of expenses. Okay, these are good examples. So Now we will see how can we categorize these examples, okay, together in this project expense. I mean, some of the expenses, as you see here, are one-time expenses. For example, construction. If they need to construct all the places from zero, right? It's a one-time cost. I mean, not reoccurring. So what we call this kind of expenses, right? We will learn about this. Or the raw material. I mean, the raw material is somehow a variable cost, right? Because it varies according to you spend how much copy you sold. I mean, accordingly you buy that raw material, right? So it changes. But employee costs, is it, for example, what kind of a cost is that, right? A fixed cost, a variable cost, right? And rents again. So these kind of things that we discussed today. And these are important. We need to categorize these costs under the right places so that we can calculate the overall budget of the project better, okay? Because some of the things that you mentioned here is about the funding phase. I mean, before you run the cafe, right? You need to bear their expenses, and some of them are will be occurring after the opening of that coffee house, right? So, what kind of a budget we need before starting the business, and what kind of a working capital, working money that we need to go on to proceed to our business. So today we will be talking about this. Okay, let me continue then. But I need to delete this. Can you see this? Yeni yazdığım şeyleri görebiliyor musunuz arkadaşlar?
Görünüyor hocam.
Ha, tamam, silerim onları da. Ben de yeni indiriyorum böyle şeyleri. Tamam. Yes. So cost management is defined as to encompass data collection, cost accounting, and cost control. So cost accounting and cost control serve the chief mechanisms for identifying and maintaining control over project costs. You need to control your costs. You need to know what you are going to face. This is an important thing, right? For example, why this coffee company asks your professional opinion? Because they want to have a more accurate forecast for their costs, right? I mean, if you just think that and you say that, for example, that without any thinking, you need to this number of this amount of money, you need that. I mean, it's most probably not accurate. So you need to control every cost dimension. You need to know what kind of cost mechanisms exist there. So we want to create a reasonable budget baseline for the project to allocate the required budget. It's an important thing. If you can do it in the planning phase, and you don't face, you won't be facing any problems in the future because you know what you're gonna see in the future, right? But if you cannot calculate this accordingly, if you cannot calculate this numbers good, so you have problems. So let's see. So there are 4 steps, by the way: resource planning, cost estimating, cost budgeting, and then cost control. So cost control exists at the when you start the project, right? Cost budgeting is when you at the beginning of the project. Before the project, actually you do resource planning and cost estimating. Okay. So common sources of project cost. Actually, you gave the examples when we try to open up a coffee house. Labor expense is number 1. Materials that you use, the subcontractors, if you have any, as you said, that suppliers, if you want to buy your raw materials, or if there is any company that do some part of that project, it's also a source of project costs. Equipment and the facilities that you need, and the travel costs. That is, you need to consider these. So there are different types of costs. That is what I was talking about. Let's see what are those: direct, indirect, recurring, non-recurring, fixed, variable, and normal expected costs. Let's see them. So direct costs means that the expenses that directly go into the product, producing goods or producing services. Or in this case, in the project case, the expenses that directly related to your project. Okay, I mean, direct labor, for example, that you use for that project, direct materials that you use to produce that goods or with others, and manufacturing supplies. These kind of things, that these are direct costs. What about indirect costs? These are general business expenses. That is regardless of the operation of the project management. I mean, it's not specific to that project, but these are general indirect costs. So, for example, rent, right? You need to pay that. It's not about the project itself. I mean, if you rent somewhere, if you try to have some places to do that project, and you have to pay the rent, or utilities, as we mentioned, electricity, water, Wi-Fi, and general office expenses. These are not directly related to the project costs. Okay. Recurring costs, repetitive costs, they are repeating themselves. For example, rents, right? Utilities, there's every week, every month, you are paying that. This is called recurring costs. Non-recurring costs are one-time expenses only. Development, investment, and other costs are paid only once. Like this is this construction cost, for example. One time you pay for it, right? Or insurance, for example, you pay it one time if it's one time only. So, what about fixed and variable costs? Fixed costs remain the same regardless of the sales. Okay, variable costs change based on your sales activity. For example, the total cost of a project equals the fixed cost plus variable costs. Okay? Fixed and variable costs can be made up of both direct and indirect costs. They could both create these costs. So, for example, if your cost does not change during the project time, we call it a fixed cost, as you see in the graph here. But while you go on in the project, if these costs are increasing, we call it a variable cost. Okay. For example, the salaries. I mean, salaries at the beginning of the project is zero, maybe, right, for the people that work for you. But each week or each month, you pay the project team, so it's increasing during the time. And for fixed costs, for example, one of purchases to do that project, I mean, you have to buy some machine, some equipment, something that you need to buy. So it's a fixed cost. I mean, it's not changed during the time. This is the difference between them. And normal and expedited costs means that normal costs are the cost that you write in the original plan. Okay. I mean, normal cost you are writing, you are expecting that cost. But expedited costs are unplanned costs as a result of steps taken to accelerate project completion. For example, if you do overtime, okay, project, I mean, you couldn't meet the deadline, or you need to hire additional workers. So you cannot plan well. You need additional workers, additional team members, or you want to do the project more quickly. So you need extra resources, extra people, extra overtime. So these are costs. These costs are called expedited costs. So here you can see how we classify our costs. So each cost actually have this type of costs, have a type of cost, right? For example, direct labor. It's a direct cost, recurring cost. Every month we pay for it. It's a fixed cost because it's a direct labor cost. It does not change with the amount of production, right? And it's a normal cost, for example. And lease, building lease, it's an indirect cost, right? Because it's lease. It's not directly related with the project idea itself, project itself, but it is recurring. I mean, you are paying the lease payments every month. It's a fixed cost. It does not change with the production amount, and it's a normal cost. Expedited costs, like we mentioned before, it's a direct cost related to project, but it's not non-recurring. Maybe one time you are paying that. It's a variable cost. It's varies according to the production numbers, and its schedule is expedited cost, as the name gives it. So these are as you see the examples. I mean, you need to know what kind of cost you have. For each your cost, you need to know what kind of a cost is that, so that you can tell the company that you are providing advisory. Okay, these are your direct costs. I mean, these are your fixed costs. These are your normal costs, and blah blah. Right. So how can you estimate these costs? This is an important issue. I mean, the One very general one is ballpark or order of magnitude, they call it. In Turkish, we call it parmak hesabı, right? So usually at the beginning of the project life cycle, someone says, okay, you need to $300,000 for that project. So how come you get that point? I have a feeling that I know that I know this industry. I think the average total number is that. So it's a bad way of estimating costs, right? Many people are doing that, but because you don't go into the detail, you just make an estimation about the project cost. So you have a problem about 30% non-accuracy problem about this cost estimation generally. Comparative estimations, if there's a historical data, statistical parameter estimation, and you are using that. For example, you are looking at the previous 30 houses which were opened last year in that Bahçeli district, and you ask them their costs. So you say if they are making this amount of cost, I mean, I would probably do a similar amount of costs. It's a more accurate one, but it's again 15% on general non-accuracy problem. So if you have a feasibility, if you have real data after planning, if you can collect the numbers, for example, you look at the labor cost, you look at the material cost, you look at the rents, you look at the insurance, leasing, everything, you make a list of costs. It is better. We call it feasibility. And feasibility are required before starting big projects. Okay? Big projects, the government, for example, or the funder of that project, I mean, requires the feasibility reports. So they want to look at every single number of costs and their estimation of costs. And after the design, when you start the cost, definitive cost estimation, you know the prices, right? You know what you are going to do. It's the most accurate one. Okay. What's a learning curve mean? Don't worry about these functions. I mean, I don't care about them as well. But the main idea is here is that during by the time passes, okay, actually you perform last effort to produce that output. Means that. So at the beginning of the project, people are not getting used to, okay, do that project. For example, produce some product at the beginning of the project. They don't know how to do that. But by the time passes, they get used to it. They know how to do that, and the time they need to produce the same product will decrease. Okay, this is what a learning curve means. So average cost reduction over time due to production experience. For example, think about yourselves. I mean, I ask you, let's say, to produce some material, some, let's say, shoes. You are producing some shoes. So your first shoe that you produce, you spend, for example, 50 minutes to produce that. I mean, you don't know because how to arrange the material together, and it takes time. But at the second time, it drops dramatically, right? To, let's say, 30 minutes, and then 20 minutes, and then 10 minutes. And as you see, by the time passes, by you repeat your activities, right? You learn how to do that, and you learn it more quickly. This is what learning curve means. Okay. Why this is important? Because if you calculate that your workers would do the production at this time or this cost, 50 cost, through all of the projects, and it's a miscalculation because when the project goes on, your employees will get experience and they will do it more quickly. Okay, so it will decrease your actually costs. It will give you some time. You need to calculate better. So there are some software project estimation like function point analysis. And this is a system for estimating the size of software projects based on what the software does. I mean, this is a detail. You don't need to. We don't need to go into the details of that, right? Specific to the software projects. Let's go on. And complexity weighting table for function point analysis. This is the details of that. Interfaces, queries, files. So these are like computer things that we don't need to take our time. So what's kind of problems that we can have with cost estimation? Okay, let's talk about them. So low initial estimates. So maybe you have a misperception of the scope. The scope is badly written. So you estimated badly the cost. It's a very common problem. And unexpected technical difficulties. So we generally say that all of the things being equal, this task should cost this amount, right? But there will never, other things will never be equal. I mean, always there are other kind of problems, other kind of technical difficulties exist. So lack of definition, the result of poor initial scope development is often the creation of projects with poorly defined features, goals, and even purpose. So, for example, you missed some of the goals, some of the purposes, you missed some of the activities that you need to do. But when you start the project, you realize that there are additional activities that you need to do, that you need to handle. It's a problem, right? This is a common thing. And specification changes. Sometimes requirement of the project changes and you need to change your budget accordingly. And there are sometimes external factors like anything like economic problems, pandemic, right? A crisis, different things. So a budget is related with the project plan like that. Here work breakdown structure, right? We know that we have a detailed plans, we have detailed activities. Here we have a schedule, and here we have budget. So it's the very important thing, right? Very important thing. I mean, you can do it very well, the project plan, work breakdown structure, and scheduling. But if you cannot calculate the budget correctly, it's a problem. A budget identifies the resources, goals, and schedule that allows a firm to achieve their goals. Very, very important. And there are different types of creating a project budget. I mean, who decides that, right? Who will decide the project budget? Me, project team members, project manager, the company CEO, who? There are different approaches here. Let's look at them. Top down, bottom up, and activity-based costing. Top down, as the name gives you the clue, right? The managers decide, top managers decide the budgeting. It's generally more accurate estimations they have about it. Okay? Bottom-up budgeting, actually, you start with the work breakdown structure, and you give each of them some cost calculations, which seems more accurate, right? Because for each of the activity, you provide them a cost budget for them, and then at the end of the day, you sum all the things up. So, top-down is benefit of experienced senior personnel getting directly involved in project estimation, but can create friction between departments, right? Can create some problems. I mean, some departments may say that I would need more money, I would need more budget. So why would you ask me for beforehand, right? These kind of problems. Bottom up is based on the detailed plans that we prepared, but bottom-up budgeting reduces top management's control over the budget, so may result in a disconnect between the strategic plans and direction of the project. What do I mean by that? I mean, generally, the departments, okay, asks more money than they need. For example, think about a big project. I mean, you are a marketing, you are, let's say, responsible on the marketing side, and some other guy is responsible on the engineering side, some other guy is responsible on the sales side, etc. Something like that. So each of the departments actually asks more money, right? Because they want to do it better, they want to do it with more flexibility, and sometimes they could exaggerate the actual need, right? They could ask more and more. In government, actually, we see it a lot. The government institutions, they ask the budget from the government, and every year the assembly approves their budgets, right? So every year they ask for, I mean, maybe more budgets, but the government cuts some amount of them and give them back. So every government institution actually asks for more money, but the government cuts some amount and give them. So this kind of problems would occur for that reason. So activity-based costing, use that the project use activities use resources, assign cost to activities that use the resources, identify the cost drivers associated with this activity, compute a cost rate for cost driver unit or transaction, and multiply them with each other. So, sorry, actually, bottom up does not, I said, work package level, they ask the money, but the activity-based costing is more detailed for each activity. They ask the cost. For example, let's see, how can sample project budget. So activities are listed here. We have 6 activities here, okay? We know their direct costs, and we have an overhead here. If there's a problem, if we exceed the necessities, if we need extra money, and then we look at the actual, how actual budget actually put here. We see that, right? Variance. If there is a minus or positive variance, so we need to ask why, right? And also you need to divide this by time. If, for example, the project is 5 months and the numbers of the cost for each month you need to calculate. And the cumulative budget cost, as you see here, increasing by time, which is very normal. When you start at the project, I mean, you also start to spend the money, spend the budget. So every month you spend more and more. It's cumulatively going up. So what does contingency means? Extra funds cover uncertainties. Okay, extra money that you write in the budget. If there's any problem, if you fall short of your money, I mean, you write extra. It's a good thing to write extra funds because there may be problems and the budget, the project could go in danger. So why we need that? Project scope may change. We may need additional activities, additional things that you need to include in the project. Murphy's Law. Do you know Murphy's Law? Have you heard of it?
Yes, yani bu bildiğimiz Murphy's Law değil mi hocam?
Aynen. Bildiğiniz Murphy kuralları değil mi? Bir şey kötü olacaksa o kötü olur yani.
Aynen.
Yani olacağı varsa kötü olur. Başka bir sıkıntı gelecekse gelir gibi. What they mean by that Murphy's Law? If there is something bad chance, bad threat, I mean, it could find you. Most probably it will find you, right? So you have to be ready for that. So cost estimation must anticipate interaction costs, and normal conditions are rarely encountered. A plan is never 100% true. Even if you do the very complicated ways using complicated calculation methodologies, you plan it very well, but in reality, the plan is not accurate. I mean, what we look for, the most close to the accurate. For example, if it is 80% accurate, it's a very good thing, for example. But if it is 10% accurate, it's a disaster, right? But nearly no one, maybe under only laboratory conditions, we can assure that there is 100% accuracy with the plan. So if anything can go wrong, it's will. This is the Murphy's Law. So benefits of contingency funding: recognize future contains unknowns, adds provision for company plans for an increase in project costs, and applies contingency fund as an early warning signal to potential overdrawn budgets. So the contingencies does not mean you are over budgeting, you are exceeding your budget. Actually, you are saying that at the beginning of the project, okay, I have a normal budget here, but I have a contingency at that amount, let's say 10%, 15%. So if you use that contingencies, no one tells you that you are exceeding your budget, right? But they actually signal you. I mean, there are some problems here, so be careful. There may be extra budget needs. So planned and actual costs, right? So there's a planned cost and a committed cost, a realized cost. We call the difference as cost variance. So this variance can be both positive or negative. Negative variance is always bad, right? Because it means that you are actually cannot calculate the cost well. I mean, you need extra money. But the positive cost, positive variance, I mean, for example, you plan to spend one activity $100,000, but you spent $50,000. Is it a good thing? You planned 100, but you actually spent 50. Is it a good thing or bad thing? What do you say?
And when we plan to pay 100%, but we pay 50%, I think that's a good thing.
Yes, generally it's a good thing, but not necessarily. Why? I mean, a positive variance means that you don't have a good control, maybe, you don't have a good plan, maybe, right? I mean, you plan it, if it is too high, I mean, you plan it very badly. I mean, how come you plan double times, for example? Or it's good for your costs, but it's bad for your planning, okay? It shows you have a good control over your costs. It's a good thing, and you can control it. But some outgoing not recorded. I mean, maybe something that you not recorded here.
Hocam maybe 50%, yani öyle bir fark çok, hani 100% to 50%, but can we think about maybe like a 2-3% hani some kind of artı eksi hani calculation? Is it also a bad planning, or it's
No,
just expected?
It's an expected thing. We
Okay.
mentioned about huge differences.
Okay.
I mean, always, I mean, 5%, 10% differences. I mean, it's because of your performance. Maybe you have a good control, you have a good performance. You can make some money. I mean, you keep some of your money without spending it. I mean, it's a good thing. But if the difference is too much, so they will ask you, what kind of a planner are you, right? Why did you tell us 100,000, but now we just spent 50,000, right? You need to explain why.
Okay.
Okay. Maybe the activities for the period are not finished. Maybe you didn't do the job well. Maybe something is missing, right? Because normally you need to spend that money. You didn't spend. So is there some quality problems? Is there some? So this kind of question marks could occur. So 3 alternative sources for negative variance: full control. Yes, you cannot control the costs. Someone is stealing, maybe, right? Someone in your project teams, project partners may steal from you. How do you know that? Extra unbudgeted work was included, right? As the expedited costs, as you remember. Some activity costs are underestimated. So it's again a bad planning problem. We want to do that example. So there are 3 activities planned for a year, okay? Plan activity a planned cost of $1,000. Activity B, a planned cost of $500,000, and C, 1,500. Okay. So what would happen? Activity A turned out to be more expensive with an additional 200. Activity B was done as budgeted, and C is not finished in the year, and only $1,000 was spent on it. So an additional D activity was needed and performed with a cost of $300. So what is the cost variance for the given year? What's the conclusion on the cost performance? So normally I make you do that, but you don't need to do that. So just look at the numbers and comment on that. So these are your planned costs, okay? These are your actual costs. So when you see that, there is a zero variance at the end. But is it a good thing or bad thing? I mean, how can we be sure that? I mean, if we don't look at the details, if we just look at the overall of the project, I mean, you use your budget, right? There is no extra money. However, you have an additional D activity, okay? You performed it. I mean, you can find an extra money for it from your budget. It's a good thing. However, the problem is that activity C is not finished, right? In that year. So you need to spend the additional $500 to that the next year. So it's a bad performance, right? About costs, not a good performance. But if you look at that year, it's a zero. It's even. So it seems that you have no problems, right?
Hocam,
Efendim, buyurun.
if you look at the before slide, we can we say that cost variance is equal to 0? Okay, our plan is good, and also our cost plan is good. It's true.
Actually, I was trying to explain that. I mean, when you first look at that, it seems nice, it seems good, but there are some problems in the details, right? For example, activity C is not finished, so you need to finish that activity in the next year, right? So for that year, so activity C is not finished. It's a problem. So are you continuing that project? Is it finished? The project is expected like that without finishing activity C? You don't know that. So activity A is more expensive than you expected, right? These are all problematic area. So the conclusion on the cost performance seems okay, but there could be some problems, right? So how to find out the true reason of the cost variance? So improving the data, percentage of activity remaining, percentage of activity completed. So variance analysis, variance can be broken down into a set of sub-budget variances like labor overhead, blah, blah, blah. So what does our book says is you need to you don't just need to look at the cost variance, but you need to also look at the schedule variance. As you see in our example, we have a schedule problem with activity C. You need to continue in the next year. Normally, you need to finish that project in 1 year, but we couldn't finish that project. So it's a problem. So if you have a schedule variance, okay, we have a problem. So if we don't have a cost variance and schedule variance, we have done the project on time and no overspend, which is very good. But we don't have a cost variance in our example, right? It is 0, but we have a schedule variance. And we have running late, but no overspend. Okay, running late. And we may have some overspend in the next year because we just not finished that activity C. If it is both negative, cost variance is negative and schedule is negative, which means running late with overspend. Schedule variance is on time, 0, but cost variance overspend, right? You finish the project, but you spend more. So we can look at this from that perspective as well. I mean, the cost variance and then the schedule variance at the same time. Okay, this is it for today. Do you have any questions?
No hocam, thank you.
Thank you hocam.